current status of Americans is really a state of bondage if you really look at it. If you want to look at, I go and I talk to Afro-American groups in Los Angeles, and I'm involved in some gang intervention stuff there in LA, and I think what they know, and at the churches and at the community groups, is that they never really ended slavery in the United States. With the 14th Amendment, they simply said, wow, that's neat, show us how to do it to everybody. What happened directly after the Civil War is that they were not going to take blacks and turn them into full-fledged citizens under the Constitution, which everybody at that time considered was for white males. It excluded women, it excluded Indians, it excluded blacks. But what they did do is they passed the 14th Amendment, and the 14th Amendment created a second class of citizen, a lowercase C citizen, as opposed to a capital C citizen, which was sovereign, a lowercase citizen, which was in essence a subject of the federal government. What happened is the federal government came along, bought the slave contracts on the plantations, and created the second class of citizen, of what they call a U.S. or United States citizen. You became a citizen of the District of Columbia and became a resident of the sovereign states. And there's a huge difference. A citizen can own land and guns and is in fact sovereign as we the people. A resident doesn't own property, can't own property, you don't own property, none of you own property. You don't have title, you have a certificate of title. If you're sovereign over your property, you either own it or you don't. Can the government take it away from you if you don't pay your property taxes? Yeah. Does that mean you own it? There you go. There's your answer to that. So the idea was that by creating a second class of citizen, a federal citizen, literally a resident within the sovereign states, it used to be that you were a citizen of a sovereign republic like Texas, or the Bear Flag Republic of California, or Virginia, or New York, or what have you. When they created the federal citizen after the Civil War, this was then advanced up until 1933. In 1933, after FDR took office and the federal government went bankrupt, House Joint Resolution 192, which was passed June 5th of 1933, outlawed private ownership of gold or silver. Technically only outlawed federal citizens owning gold or silver. That's number one. Number two, changed the monetary system to the faith, energy, and spirit of the people of the United States. Not gold or silver under Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, but faith, energy, and spirit of the people of the United States. At the same time, by instituting the Social Security system, they basically just put another layer of control on top of the federal citizenship. So what they did is that they turned the American people into cattle, into collateral for the bankruptcy of 1933. The Federal Reserve Act is passed in 1913. The Federal Reserve begins to print Federal Reserve notes, not US dollars. They flood the bond and credit markets with cheap capital. Everybody buys into it. Then they stop printing those. They take away everybody's stuff. It took them exactly 20 years to bankrupt the federal government. The federal government goes into receivership, goes into bankruptcy. The arbitrator of the bankruptcy is the Supreme Court. You actually go to the Supreme Court, and there's a plaque there that says United States Supreme Court of Bankruptcy, 1933, and the holder of the note is the privately controlled banks of the Federal Reserve System. So what happens is that if Farmer Brown wants to borrow $1 million from the bank, Farmer Brown goes to the bank and they say, well, what do you have to put up as collateral? And he says, well, I have these cows, and these cows are worth $1 million. And they say, well, prove you own the cows. And he says, well, they have a brand, they have a tag, they have a number on their ear, Social Security number. Here's the certificates of live birth for all my cattle, my certificates of ownership, basically, for the cattle. You turn that over to the bank, and the bank says, okay, here's your $1 million. And if you don't pay that $1 million back, then we come and take your cows. Well, the people of the United States were turned into collateral for the bankruptcy of 1933. So when you're born, your birth certificate, you get a copy of it, but your certificate is stamped, goes to the Commerce Department, and then is loaned around the world as a bond. So you're literally put into bondage, and with your Social Security number. That's one of the reasons why they want to tag babies with Social Security numbers like right away, because they can start borrowing against those bonds, literally in bondage.